Death is unnecessary. We are on the threshold of a new system of living.
These people who set out to create their own religion or philosophy or whatever you want to call it, out here promising immortality, or if not that, just a crazy long lifespan and also possibly magical powers, all seem like insane promises to make. Wouldn't it be better to offer up a flavor of salvation that you at least have a shot at delivering? Or maybe that's a question that only those of us not drunk on our own glory would even think to ask. I mean, how many people do you know who are utterly convinced that they alone know the secret to the best and most fulfilling life? Most likely, not many. Maybe not any. But here's a man with a plan, a man who dreams bigger than anyone, a man who even took it upon himself to try and create a universal language for all the people on Earth, a language he called Adam Man Tongue.
The English alphabet is seriously defective in that its letters do not tell us their true sounds.
Zero disagreement about that, but Adam Man Tongue added an extra 17 letters to the alphabet and about 43,000 layers of confusion.
It's hardly necessary to say that the Adam Man Tongue is intended to take the place of present English among all English-speaking people as the first step in its new progress. And when this shall have been accomplished, to go to all the nations of the world as the permanent language of the human race. Such is its mission.
And if kicking death to the curb doesn't impress you and inventing a universal language for the people of Earth is whatever, then maybe his idea for creating the ultimate food for humans, everything the body needs all in one bowl, maybe that's what you're looking for. A nice big bowl of people chow.
And make out a small beam of light against the mirror.
True weird stuff.
The story began for us with an email from a listener named Brenna Ralston.
Hi, Sherry and Max. I wanted to throw an idea your way for true weird stuff. I was in a used bookstore recently and I came across an antique book full of crazy ramblings called Other Mind. There are lots of crazy old books that exist, of course, but I was personally interested in this one because it was printed by Ralston University Press. My last name is Ralston and I'd never heard of such a thing. Only Ralston as connected to the Purina brand years ago, which has disappeared from their branding in recent years. Later, when I Googled Ralston University Press, I was taken to the Ralstonism Wikipedia page, and from there tumbled down a rabbit hole of absolute insanity about a dude named Webster Edgerly. He has like 3 aliases as well, and his crazy cult, which is or was actually tangentially connected to Purina back in the day.
Brenna wasn't kidding about the absolute insanity.
Ralstonism is for the rich and the poor, the high and the lowly, the sick and the well of all nations and in all climes. Among its members are governors, superintendents, bishops, ministers, physicians, statesmen, merchants, judges, congressmen, farmers, clerks, bankers, society women, and home women. In fact, people of every occupation.
Sounds inclusive and welcoming, right? And it was, kind of, sort of, as long as you're not bothered by the founder's dream of having all non-Caucasian males castrated at birth. Oh, yeah, and also involuntary euthanasia for non-Caucasians. Has any euphemism clocked a harder day at work than involuntary euthanasia? I mean, is that not just a fancy way of saying murder? What is it about Americans that we're so quick to fall under the spell of charlatans and tricksters and cult leaders? Long before the Manson family, Jonestown, the Branch Davidians, or Heaven's Gate, there was Matthias the Prophet, the Shakers, and the New Israelites. It's not your imagination. Although cults aren't unique to America, we are real global leaders in the category. One theory is that religious fervor trends lower where the standard of living is higher. And while the USA is a highly developed nation, we don't even crack the top 10 list for countries with the highest quality of life, or healthcare, or life expectancy. The living is hard here in the USA, what with catastrophic medical expenses driving people into bankruptcy, housing costs not keeping pace with wages, and. If hearing this just pisses you off, I get it. But yelling at us ain't the way. We're in the struggle too. And it's this struggle that has fertilized a weird dynamic in American culture. Guru worship and a near bottomless belief in shiny promises delivered by charismatic hucksters.
Ralstonism is not built on a theory, but rests on a solid foundation of incontrovertible facts. Facts which centuries of study and observation have demonstrated to be correct. Not the wild creation of a disordered brain, but the result of research in books, laboratories, and nature.
So, who was the wizard behind the curtain of the Ralstonite movement? His name was Albert Webster Edgerly. Born in 1852, Edgerly founded the Ralston Health Club the same year he finished law school. Overachiever. Though it might make you feel less like a slacker to know that the Ralston Health Club couldn't be found at any physical address. It existed entirely in Edgerly's imagination. In the beginning, Edgerly said that he'd made the name Ralston using letters in his mother's name, Rhoda Lucinda Stone. As time went on, though, he'd claimed that Ralston was an acronym: regime, activity, light, strength, temperation, oxygen, and nature. By temperation, I'm pretty sure he means temperance. But if you're making up your own philosophy or religion, you might as well go ahead and make up your own words, too. Regime, activity, light, strength, temperation, oxygen, and nature. All of the things that Edgerly believed to form the foundation of a superior human being. An imaginary health club wasn't going to earn the man any real dollars, but he had a plan for that, too. Edgerly would package his ideas into books. So many books. Edgerly was a wildly prolific writer, obsessed with his own notions of religious utopia and wellness. He wrote more than 100 books on the subject, published under the pen name Edmund Shaftesbury. This one is from a 545-page turner called The Shaftesbury School of Philosophy, known as the Story of Our Existences, or the Doctrine of Diversity.
Some are endowed with the disposition to improve themselves. Others desire to improve, but lack the energy to do so. And still others are perfectly indifferent to all the finer impulses of life. The last class is not teachable. Charity is supporting today thousands of miserable wretches who have scorned to lift a finger to help themselves except for the immediate present. Among the better classes, this indisposition is found in its usual proportions and indicates that proneness to laziness is a disease. Indeed, it's getting to be the opinion of medical men that all divergencies of life are forms of disease. Crime, literary genius, laziness, and others. The question now is, may a man choose to make himself active who is naturally indifferent to his success? It's a deep and intricate problem.
Deep and intricate, and also deeply and intricately and astoundingly racist.
The first duty of every Caucasian nation, to itself and to the anti-racists, is to prevent miscegenation and immigration, and certainly to prevent citizenship. The Caucasians will eventually occupy the earth, and their march will be rapid as soon as they're educated. If the white nations were to form a federation of nations and to compel the next generation to receive a thorough common school education, a half-century hence, every race on the globe would be in subjection to the Caucasians.
Edgerly, a.k.a. Shaftesbury, a.k.a. Ralston, was a passionate believer in eugenics. In a nutshell, eugenics aims to improve all of humanity by restricting breeding to certain select or desirable groups. Since human beings have never, ever successfully been persuaded to check their own biological drive to reproduce, eugenicists have tried various other strategies, like chucking an infant deemed less than robust into a chasm, as the ancient Spartans are said to have done, or drowning the weak and disappearing their bodies in a swamp, something practiced by the early Germanic tribes, at least according to the Roman historian Tacitus. And how a guy like Edgerly was able to convince his Ralstonite followers that Caucasian people were all allergic to watermelon. No, seriously, he did, and that was eugenics too. But Edgerly's ambitions wouldn't be satisfied by just lecturing people. He intended to remake the world. He'd been wandering from place to place, feverishly writing books and pamphlets, promoting his ideas about human magnetism and glame. But it was time to settle down to the business of making Ralstonism a fully realized way of life. And his starting place would be the sprawling rural community of Hopewell, New Jersey. He started buying land in 1894. And where others saw only lush farmland, Edgerly envisioned an entire city of Ralstonites, 400 homes in all, a half dozen farms, and a handful of estates, including the one he chose for himself, a 27,000 square foot Victorian mansion that he named Ralston Manor. He imported plants and trees from China and Japan. He grew fruits and vegetables that he offered to the residents of Hopewell, in the hopes of winning them over. And Edgerly also founded a special club called the Magnetism Club of America.
All are invited to join the club. Membership is grand. It's one continual round of enjoyment to be a Ralstonite. It's full of good times, good things, and happy events. Will you become a Ralstonite now?
Edgerly promised that a combination of the right foods and exercises would not only significantly amp up a member's riz, it would ultimately give those individuals the power of mind control.
We are creatures of emotions, passions, circumstances, and accident. What the mind will be, what the heart will be, what the body will be, are problems that are shaped to the drift of life, even when special attention is given to any of them. If you will sit down and think for a while, you'll be surprised to know how much of your life has been mere drift. How little you have done towards finding out the power that operates in animal volition, whence it comes, how it is lost, and how it may be utilized.
Let's start with the exercises. Edgerly declared that all movement ought to be gentle and circular, avoiding sudden stops and sharp angles, and always on the balls of the feet. Anything else risked draining one's vital forces. This meant that Ralstonites were required to move and bathe in highly specific ways. Same rules applied to how they spoke, how they slept, even how they had sex. They practiced this curving motion by gracefully scooping up marbles that had been arranged in circles on the floor, repeating the movement over and over and over again until the act of bending in a graceful arc became ingrained habit.
The natural gift of personal magnetism arises from such accidental habits that prevent the constant loss of vital electricity.
Oh, Edgerly was rapturous when talking about this vital force and apocalyptic when describing all the threats to that force that could result from its loss.
This exhaustion robs the blood circulation of its tone or health. It weakens the bones by making them like the bones of dead people. It weakens the stomach. It destroys the tone of the cuticle and skin by deadening of weak fibers. It weakens the hearing by causing part of the sounds to be obscured. It weakens the sight and causes films or small specks to move in front of the eyes. It weakens the mind and often leads to insanity.
Tempting as it is to make fun of his followers gliding around on the balls of their feet and all, there's not much difference between Edgerly and any random wellness grifter on social media today, is there? So in all this talk of cultivating and growing one's personal magnetism toward the goal of exercising power and leadership over one's fellow humans, how did Edgerly navigate the question of race and ethnicity, which is every eugenicist's favorite fixation?
Human beings still have some instinctive faculties left. When you meet someone you do not like, it is a reasonably sure deduction that that person is of an antagonistic type. Your instinct, a faculty little called for in our civilization, tells you that you will lose rather than gain from that individual's influence or from association with him.
And here it comes.
To show how little consideration has been given to racial difference and the resulting dislikes, it's only necessary to consider how the various races have been thrown together. It was the custom in a certain large industry employing large numbers of common labor to put workers of all nationalities together in one group. Finally, some observant foreman suggested that workmen be segregated into groups, and these groups be made of nationalities which would not clash.
Carefully diplomatic.
There may be an inherited repugnance which is due to ancestral experience. If your ancestors were at war for ages with another race, nation, or tribe, some of that racial or tribal antipathy is quite likely to persist.
Edgerly called this vital life force that so obsessed him glame. It's a word he made up using the first 5 letters of what he declared were the most important words in the world, in English, of course. Glame, God, G. Life, L. Advance, A. Mortality, M. Eternity, E. Glame.
All men and women possess personal magnetism, but some magnetism repels and some attracts. Magnetism is largely relative. What will repel one person may attract another. The woman who is so ugly that she causes a stampede when she enters a room may be an angel to some man as ugly as herself. She may even inspire poetry on her angelic attributes.
So ugly, it causes a stampede? Rude. Edgerly wrote reams and reams and reams about Glame in the Book of Glame, a complete course in life electricity. 334 pages, to be exact. Managing one's Glame was a whole mind-body commitment because the enemies of Glame were everywhere, like dust.
Curtains and carpets in houses in the city are the sources of more sickness than all other immediate causes combined, for they catch the foul dust that comes in from the streets and hold it until such time as they're swept or agitated, then give it out into the air of the hotel room to be inhaled by the occupants. Bedrooms are hotbeds of disease for this very reason.
And gasoline.
Those who ride in automobiles have what the doctors today call the automobile heart. And every person who has read the papers and magazines is easily familiar with this fact. But the doctors who do not study conditions closely are not cognizant of the real cause, and they assume that the high rate of speed is to blame for the weak hearts. Others, who have given the matter close study, find that the gasoline that is employed as the fuel of these cars and its volatile oil, as well as the burnt carbon, are the direct causes of the trouble.
And pain and suffering. Edgerly offered up this example of how pain can drain away human electricity.
A young man who was in a highly electrical mood for proposing to a most beautiful young lady, in walking to her, struck his foot in such a way that one of the small toes was pinched under a carved projection of a table leg. It caught his corn right in the very heart, and the pain made him as limp as a moist fabric, causing a revulsion of feeling on the part of the fair maiden. His electricity was gone. His lips ejaculated an expression that he ordinarily would have admitted until after marriage at least. As nothing is easier to cure than a corn, there's no reason why a person should suffer this kind of pain. A sharp knife will remove the whole growth of the corn, and any antiseptic valve applied each morning will prevent a new growth for some time.
A revulsion of feeling because the poor bastard stubbed his toe? Harsh. Since 19th century shoes were pretty miserable, and Dr. Scholl was only 14 years old at the time. Yes, Dr. Scholl was a real person from LaPorte, Indiana. A job at a shoe store inspired him to become a podiatrist, the creator of Foot Comfort Week, and ultimately a brand carried in a gazillion drugstores. What could that heartbroken young man do but work harder on his Glame game? And for that, he needed a Glame stick.
A man should take a piece of broom handle about 6 inches long and 7/8 of an inch thick. A woman should take a piece of broom handle about 5 inches long and 3/4 an inch thick, or even less in diameter than that. These are called Glame sticks, and they have been so called for more than 32 years. Having secured these bits of wood, you must learn to use them by diffusing Glame and not by setting the muscles. The latter are set when you have grasped the wood in such a way as to be able to use it for any purpose.
But first, you'll need to prep your hand, which is easy. Just
open the hand. Shake it until it is as limp as a damp rag. Have every finger limp and flimsy. This is called devitalizing.
The trick to getting all that Glame flowing is to diffuse the muscles, I guess, then, and not set them. But what does setting the muscles mean?
When they have grasped the wood in such a way as to be able to use it for any purpose.
So, basically, get yourself a stick and waggle your hand, and don't in any way actually hold on to the stick. And what?
The greatest power comes from the progress of the act, not from its position. It is in progress when it is increasing its tendency to tense, which means that it's actually adding power all along the way, but has not reached the point where the muscles are set.
You guys, 800,000 people followed this man. bouncing on the balls of their feet and doing their damnedest to not hold on to a piece of wood. Human beings are a pure wonder. Like the actor W. Fields once said, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. Like any proper guru, Edgerly's true gift was in knowing just how to stoke fear in his followers and then offer them their best source of protection. A solution, the one true way to fend off the multiple and terrible threats the world was just waiting to unleash on them.
Life is surrounded by enemies so numerous and pervasive that the wonder is that the race has survived these attacks. The enemies are present in every form, in the activities of the mind, the dangers to the lungs, the diet, membranous system, and bad habits in a variety of other ways.
Of course, Ralstonites, unlike the common person, at least had a fighting chance against these enemies, unlike the rest of us.
Many of the most contented people are indifferent and weak-brained, caring little for what the world may have in store for them and not knowing how to cope with its many problems.
Not that Edgerly didn't land on some solid truths that we now take for granted, like how excessive worry and anxiety take a toll on the body and mind. Now we talk about stress hormones impacting the immune system. Edgerly believed that worrying caused less air to be breathed, which reduced the body's natural electricity, also known as GLAME. It's a kooky theory, but it's one that made sense to the Ralstonites, who could indeed confirm their own experiences of the negative impacts of constantly brooding over every damn thing. Since diet was a critical aspect of Edgerly's theory of natural electricity of GLAME, it seemed to him that if merely talking about food or writing about it was good, it would be even better to create and sell special food for the Ralstonites. Now, as fate would have it, one of the 800,000 enthusiastic followers of Ralstonism was a man named William H. Danforth. Danforth was a businessman, born in Missouri in 1870, and like Edgerly, he was big on wellness, nutrition, and exercise. He had his own personal philosophy, one he described in his very well-received self-help book, I Dare You.
There are 4 key components in life that must be in balance: the physical, the mental, the social, and the religious. To be healthy, you need the 4 squares to stay in balance, and one area was not to develop at the expense of the other.
Danforth, remembering the bolt of red and white checkered cloth his mother had once turned into clothing for him and his siblings, was inspired to use that checkerboard imagery to help explain what he meant.
Picture the 4 red and white squares. To be healthy, those 4 must stay in balance. One area is not to develop at the expense of another.
Danforth made his checkerboard the logo for the company he founded in St. Louis in 1894, Purina Mills. Purina Mills was in the business of feeding livestock at first. Danforth had concocted a blend of grains, molasses, and salt. He and his partners, inspired by the name soldiers in World War I gave their food, decided to call the feed products chow, pig chow, horse chow, rabbit chow, even monkey chow, and of course, dog chow. Eventually, though, Purina Mills turned its attention to people chow, which is where Webster Edgerly and his ideas about magnetism and GLAME and the optimal diet for his Ralstonites comes in. Edgerly had become obsessed with whole grain cereals, and Danforth had become obsessed with Edgerly's ideas. Danforth must have been delighted when Edgerly urged his followers to eat Purina Mills cereals, the perfect food, he advised, to boost human magnetism. And just 3 years into the cereal business, Purina Mills officially partnered with Webster Edgerly to form Ralston Purina.
For health's sake, eat Ralston Purina foods. Our Pure family, of which Ralston breakfast food is at the head, represents the highest standard of excellence ever attained in cereal food products. Serve your family Ralston breakfast food, Ralston barley food, Ralston pancake flour, hominy grits, health oats, and whole wheat grain bread.
The competition in the cereal game was already intense. John Henry Kellogg was doing a brisk business in granola. C.W. Post gave the world that oddly named bowl of gravel called grape nuts. Cornflakes were fast becoming a fixture on American breakfast tables. Quaker Oats had figured out how to make grains of rice explode under pressure and promptly declared their puffed rice cereal to be both the first food shot from a gun, so very on brand for America, and the eighth wonder of the world. Wheaties made their debut in the 1920s and were soon duking it out with Snap, Crackle, and Pop for morning dominance. And Ralston Purina introduced Shred It Ralston. Even back then, marketing was critical on the cereal aisle, and Shred It Ralston, engineered to nourish the extremely strict and racist Ralstonites, featured the movie star Elizabeth Taylor on the box. It's doubtful she had any say in the matter. The Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer movie studio wanted to sell tickets to the movie Father of the Bride and was aggressively advertising the film everywhere it could. Now, real quick, in the 1950s, Shred It Ralston got a name change to Wheat Chex, and Wheat Chex was soon followed by Rice Chex, and eventually the beloved snack Chex Mix. And why call it Chex? Well, the word Chex was inspired by William Danforth's beloved checkerboard. How's that for a fun fact? But Ralston Purina was playing catch-up in the cereal business, so the company got creative.
A unique plan of distribution, adopted by one of the largest cereal houses in the country, is being inaugurated in the city of Trenton, whereby every home will be presented with a free breakfast for 5 people.
Ralston Purina recruited schoolboys, put them in outfits with large red and white checkerboard satchels, and sent them door to door in Trenton, New Jersey with free samples. And the boys were compensated for their effort.
The company is teaching the schoolboys the principles of merchandising and paying them with a beautiful set of Brazilian beetle cufflinks and stick pin, mounted in a green-gold setting. These beetles are from the jungles of South America and are highly prized by the natives of that country and worn by them as an omen of long life and good luck.
Boys back then were mad for cufflinks, I guess.
The Ralston Purina Company is to be congratulated in this unique plan of bringing the merits of Ralston breakfast food to the attention of the public. The enthusiasm with which the boys have taken hold of this work indicates that this city will be a Ralston stronghold henceforth.
Turning Trenton into a Ralston stronghold was bad news for the non-Caucasian men who called the place home, as they were unlikely to agree with the recommendation that they be castrated. Not to mention the city's other inhabitants who didn't fit the strict racial and eugenics guidelines put forth by Webster Edgerly, who, very much like today's horde of online wellness grifters, was hell-bent on discrediting medical experts and science.
It is gratifying that all honest doctors who have investigated Ralstonism are its friends and recommend it, or rather prescribe it in place of medicines to their patients. A doctor who has investigated this system and does not affirmatively aid and use it may be set down as dishonest and unsafe to employ.
Body heat is energy. You need it winter and summer. A cold breakfast lowers your body temperature and weakens you. Start your day with a bowl of hot Ralston breakfast food and see how much better you feel. Ralston Purina, where purity is paramount.
All this success, book after book, a whole community in New Jersey, a line of breakfast cereals manufactured by a leading company so on board that it changed its name. So what happened to Webster Edgerly and Ralstonism and Ralston Purina? The Ralstonite utopia in Hopewell, New Jersey never quite took off. The land was rich and fertile and you sure couldn't beat the location. But that part of the Garden State has always been pricey. And of the 400 proposed lots, only 25 sold. With few job opportunities and reasonable distance, only the most affluent Ralstonites could commit. And then there was the problem of drinking water. Edgerly put a large water tank on his own property to supply the entire area. But for whatever reason, cracks developed in the tank, allowing contaminants to foul the water. That appears to have been the last straw for the people of Hopewell. With his neighbors firmly against him, Edgerly moved his family to Trenton and died just 2 years later on Friday, November 5th, 1926. He was 74 years old. There was virtually no mention made of Ralstonism in any of the coverage of his death. Instead, he was described as an expert in the control of the will, as a man who'd made millions in the educational field, and the author of more than 60 books of a semi-philosophical and scientific nature. Weirdly, not a peep about the rabid racism and insane eugenics and the bewildering made-up language he called Adam Man-tongue. Ralston Purina, though, kept chugging along, kicking off international sales in 1957. 40 years later, the company sold their cereal business to General Mills. By that point, no one much knew or remembered or even cared that Wheat Chex started off as Shred-it Ralston, a people chow inspired by a peculiar and mostly forgotten social movement advocating the most appalling racism.
The yellow race are seeping in very rapidly, despite efforts to keep them out.
There's an example.
Tramps, idlers, loafers, and the whole slum crowd should be deported.
There's another example, one that sounds, ripped from today's headlines. In 2001, Nestle scooped up Ralston Purina for $10.3 billion. The company celebrated by taking on a new name, Nestle Purina Pet Care Company. And with that new name came a little case of corporate amnesia, radical eugenics, racist guy obsessed with human magnetism. When it comes to their company history, Nestle Purina Pet Care appears to have adopted the strategy, new phone, who dis? If you dig, you might find a vague reference to a Dr. Ralston, one of Edgerly's many pseudonyms. But that's all you'll find. And that's as it should be. Edgerly wasn't just a kooky eccentric who wanted his followers forever bouncing on the balls of their feet and practicing the new consonants of Adam Man-tongue. He believed that non-Caucasian men should be gathered up and castrated, that the non-Caucasian people of this world were best eliminated entirely. No amount of flowery language or silly exercises or steaming bowls of hot cereal can cover up the rancid truth of the man. He's long dead now, as is his admirer and one-time partner, William Danforth, who not only agreed wholeheartedly with Edgerly's revolting beliefs, but who made his first fortune shoveling pellets of green molasses and salt into farm animals and household pets. No wonder Purina keeps their distance, even as the company keeps that red and white checkerboard in its logo, even today. And now you know what that checkerboard once represented.
Life is full of hope and expectation, but few plans are ever realized. We think out our way for years ahead and die in the same old tracks. But the thinking ahead carries hope.
Edgerly wasn't wrong about that. Thinking ahead does carry hope. People always hope for better. We hope to be better. Sure, we have to learn the same terrible lessons over and over and over and over and over and over, but we do make our own slow progress. And eventually, with time and often bloodshed, a man like Edgerly,
Ralstonism is the grandest movement that man is capable of establishing,
winds up forgotten. His followers melt into the background, oddly quiet and suddenly hesitant to own up to what they once so proudly and so loudly proclaimed. Maybe they felt silly about all the hours spent balancing on the balls of their feet and chanting made-up words. Maybe they were ashamed by how easily and gleefully they bought into an idea of their own superiority, and by how easily and gleefully they agreed that their neighbors were a poison, corrupting the glory that was their birthright.
Whatever may be the immediate verdict of mankind, I am sure that my principles will be ultimately accepted and unreservedly believed by all the intelligent world.
Well, I'm sorry. Who are you? Next time on True Weird Stuff, it's fair season. Grab a corn dog, take a spin on the tilt-a-whirl, try your hand at winning a giant stuffed bluey on the Midway, and then head on over to the livestock pavilion. Prize hogs and blue ribbon cattle, goats and chickens and meat rabbits. Now, there was a time when another kind of animal competed at the fair. The human animal. Breeding better babies at the state fair. That's on the next True Weird Stuff.
Special thanks to our voice talents on this episode. Don Morgan.
Whew, this guy. What have you gotten me into, Sherry? Lord have mercy.
And Aaron Cox.
Well, this is fun. We don't usually have a friend come over to play for our episode postmortem, but Brenna Ralston, who inspired this episode, is with us right now. Hey, Brenna.
Hey, Sherry. Hey, Max.
Hey.
So is it a giant relief to you that your good last name, Ralston, is not really biologically or in any way related to this crazy eugenic nut job, because he just made it up and it happens to be your last name? Did that come as a relief when you went down that rabbit hole?
Yes, because my grandmother actually did a lot of genealogy stuff when I was a kid, and she continually hit a wall on my granddad. His family was from Scotland, and she could sort of trace them back to East Tennessee and then to Scotland, but she would hit a wall and then that was it. So I was like, maybe this is related when I saw it. But so, yes, I was very relieved that this was not the answer.
This guy, I mean, this is a person who, the amount of pages that he wrote, and I, after getting your email, Brenna, I went looking for Webster Edgerly and I found his books, and I have to say, like, he deserves a prize for being able to put so many words on so many pages. These books are insane. There were sections of his books where I would have to read the same page 4 times to try to figure out, I'm sorry, what in the hellacious heck is this man trying to convey with this? He was, and I mean this in the most clinical kind of way, he was nuts and incredibly prolific. It's almost, Max, like you and I have maybe met people like this, whose brains never turn off and they just vomit it all onto the page. But somehow this man persuaded nearly 1 million people to follow him. And the one thing I can say about that is this. At the time that Webster Edgerly was advocating for the castration of non-Caucasian men and the elimination of all non-Caucasian peoples and the deportation of anyone that he deemed shiftless, a lot of people believed that. Eugenics was really a huge, huge mainstream thing in the United States prior to World War II, when the Nazis took the shine off of it. So when you think about what Webster Edgerly was preaching, and then you remember that he was preaching it at a time when people were like, yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. It really makes it all the worse, doesn't it? That he's not just some Looney Tune yelling at clouds, but that he was really articulating thoughts that big swaths of the population kind of had.
It does make you wonder whether it was the health part of his message or the eugenics, racism part of his message, which was the greatest attraction.
Oh, that's a good question. And jump in at any time, Brenda, because I know that you had to like shove your eyeballs back into your head after you found this man too.
Yeah. I think it's kind of sad that they took the really groundbreaking work of Charles Darwin, which I think started a lot of that, and turned it into this. And like you said, this was incredibly common at the time. So I think, to Max's point, it really could have been either one, unfortunately.
When I think about the number of stories that we've told on this podcast where eugenics is a feature, do you remember the Pine Barrens episodes, Max?
Yep.
I mean, eugenics are everywhere. Eugenics show up in next week's episode when we take you to the livestock pavilion at the state fair to let's see how many of these human babies we can get a prize for. I mean, as a species, we're just like insane. But at the time, it was mainstream. And the simple truth of it is that it never went away. It just kind of went underground after the revelations of the Third Reich and the Nazi Holocaust. As American GIs liberated death camps and the full magnitude of what had been done was revealed, because the Nazis were the Mac Daddy eugenicists, right? When all of that was revealed, all the folks on this side of the ocean who were believers in it were like, well, shit. And it went quiet. It went underground, but it never went away. So like Brenna, when I read your email, I was like, yeah, wait a minute. I remember it was Ralston Purina for almost my whole life. And now it's not. And our dog eats Purina Pro Plan, and one of our cats eats Purina Pro Plan. So we're Purina Pro Plan people. And that checkerboard on the bag, I never gave it a minute's thought. I was like, oh, it signals wholesome home cooking or something. I don't know what I thought. But the truth is that the Ralston Purina checkerboard was part of William Danforth, the founder of Purina's, part of his own like philosophy. And he had an incredibly popular best-selling self-help book that he wrote called I Dare You, that we mentioned in the episode, that you can still find in different places. That checkerboard was the 4, things in life that had to be in balance. So the original people chow that Purina made under William Danforth, under the Ralston Purina banner, was called Shred It Ralston. But all it was wheat checks. They shredded the wheat and they formed it into the iconic checkerboard that William Danforth was so obsessed with. And they didn't change the name until the late 1950s. So wheat checks, rice checks, checks mix, all of that is related to that Purina checkerboard, which is one of the few things that survived the merger. They lost the Ralston name and they became Nestle Purina. And they also lost any acknowledgement of the history of the original Ralston Purina company. If you do some searching online, you can find little nuggets that redirect you to Purina's corporate websites, but Purina has scrubbed any mention of Ralstonism or Webster Edgerly. I mean, they just went in and did a deep dive and removed all of it, because it's not helpful, especially now with the internet, when you get somebody that's like, oh, hey, wait a minute. As a company, you used to advocate this, And then boom, it can go viral and trigger a boycott and all kinds of drama. So Purina scrubbed any mention of Ralston from its own corporate mythology. And to be fair, the Purina that exists today, is not the Ralston Purina, of the eugenics movement of this period that this story is set in, to be fair.
What was so when you were looking at this, Brenda? Go ahead. I was going to ask, what was it that when you started to look at this, what was the most surprising thing that you came across with that made you say, I really need to dig deeper here?
Well, my whole life, people would say when I tell them our last name, they'd say, "Oh, are you related to Ralston Purina?" And I'm like, "Well, we're not poor, but I think we wouldn't be in the financial situation we are if we were." But I don't know. I just Googled it, and I actually Googled Ralston University Press, which was on the side of the book. So I was like, I have never heard of this, and I have 2 graduate degrees. My father worked in higher ed his whole career. He's retired now, but he was, at the time he retired, he was a provost. We moved around a lot. So I'm familiar with a lot of most, I would say, colleges and universities. And I was like, I've never heard of this. And for something to have my last name on it, that is so strange. So that's what I actually Googled first, was Ralston University Press. And it took me to the Ralstonism movement. And I don't know if just a cursory glance at the Wikipedia page is one of the most insane things I've ever read. And it just lists things so casually. It talks about all of his aliases, and then it talks about how he had books on everything from elocution and ventriloquism. And I was like, who is this guy? So then I clicked him and I just started Googling it. And then I found about the commune, and I was like, this is a rabbit hole. And that's when I thought of y'all, because I was like, this is, I thought Sherry could do it more justice research wise than I had time to do.
I was astonished by what I found, and we owe any knowledge that we have. This is how deeply Ralstonism got shoved aside in memory hold. A graduate student who went to the Ralston Manor, his old 27,000 square foot Victorian mansion in Hopewell, New Jersey. It still stands. And a graduate student went working on a research project. And it was that student's work that sort of like unearthed this idea of Ralstonism and the Ralstonites. And that now a lot of this stuff has been archived, and that we're talking about this in part because one curious person went, wait a minute, what the heck is this? And you can see how successful, and I don't mean this in a sinister, like crazy tinfoil hat way. You can really see how successful Purina was in shutting this ish down, because when Nestle bought Purina, it was before the internet. It was right before the internet. So a good time to scrub your history would be before it gets online, right?
Yeah. She, I think her name was Janet Six, the woman who, she's like the only person I think who's ever done any concrete, legitimate research on this. And she has, I think, said she wants to write a book, but hasn't done it yet. But yeah, Purina claims it was some guy. I guess Janet Six had mentioned in a podcast or something that I listened to that when she contacted them, they legitimately seemed to not know what she was talking about. And they said, oh, no, it's this man named Dr. Everett Ralston. And she was like, no, it wasn't. So it may be that the people working there now legitimately do not have any idea that this is, part of the origin of their company.
I think that you're right about that. And that's why I say, to be fair, the Purina that we are feeding our pets today is not the same company as the Purina of this story. Even when you go looking, like I was able to find all sorts of kooky stuff about Ralston. But by the time he got discovered by William Danforth, the founder of Purina, Purina was already a very successful livestock feed company. And by the time William Danforth found Webster Edgerly, Danforth was eyeing the incredibly lucrative breakfast foods market. And Edgerly had this, Danforth was a believer in what Edgerly was preaching. And Edgerly had this sort of built-in customer base for this future breakfast food that Purina would put out. But it's a sign of how much of a follower William Danforth was that he gave the company the name Ralston Purina, not even Purina Ralston, Brenna. Like he put Ralston first in the mix. That's an accolade right there. And I have to say, setting aside all of the unfreaking believable racism, capital R racism, do you have any idea how much money they made on breakfast cereal, on people food products?
Wow,
crazy money. Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid sitting at the breakfast table, it seemed funny to me that the logo on the cereal box was the same as the logo on the bag of dog chow that my father fed the beagles.
I just sort of accepted it. I just went, oh, there it is. And it is so iconic. I think the weirdest thing that I'm seeing on the Wikipedia page is they suggest that every young man should engage in a form of probationary marriage with a woman old enough to be his grandmother. What?
Yeah. I put that in and then took it out because it leads you down this tangent of what is it with these freaking cult leaders and their horror of sex with women? Like, what is it with these guys?
Which, by the way, I don't think he even did. He married, I read something about him. He was married to someone age appropriate for him early on. And I don't know if you put this in the episode, but he thought she was cheating on him. So he organized like a sting operation to try to catch her. And then he was, I think, run out of, I don't know what, Massachusetts maybe, or Kansas. He was run out of town. And then he married at 42 someone who was 18. So this was his, little health club. So where this idea that you should marry someone as old as your grandmother came from, I don't know, because he didn't do that.
Well, you know how these guys are. It's fine for thee, but not for me, right? And
yes.
In what universe are any of us surprised that that somebody's grandpa wants an 18-year-old bride? Talk about ripped from the headlines, right? Yeah. So there's nothing strange about that. It's just amazing to me, having read I haven't read all of the man's books. I'm sorry, you struggle to
read. You couldn't.
You couldn't. I mean, there's a gazillion pages. You couldn't. And they're insane.
I think you would go insane before you accomplish that. There's like 80 of them. And they're
sometimes
long. They're not.
They're so long.
The one that
the
one that I saw at the bookstore was a couple inches thick. So they're not novellas.
I would read a page and my brain would go, that didn't make any sense. And so then I would stand up and read that same page out loud thinking, well, maybe I'm just distracted and it wouldn't make any sense. I'd read it a sentence at a time and it wouldn't make any sense. And then I realized it's because it doesn't make any sense.
Sherry, this is the guy you get stuck with at the party. And then you'll shoot the look. Help! Help!
The whole thing about Glame and the Glame stick.
Where that all up? That's crazy.
So Glame, Brenna, is your body's natural electricity, vitality, life force. Like he had all these different ways of talking about it. Everyone has Glame, Glame, Glame. And you would work on amplifying your Glame, like you would train your Glame like a muscle, make your Glame stronger. by working with a glame stick. So this would be like part of a broom handle, right, Max? This is part of a broom handle.
That's right.
And the thing is, you would shake your hand. So shake your hand right now so it's really relaxed, right? Get those fingers all good and limp. And then reach for your glame stick. If your hands can grasp the stick, you're not doing it right. So then you got to shake your hand again. The goal here, as best I can understand it, is to not be able to hold a stick.
I have to wonder, when I was reading all this, I don't know if you read the part about the marble and how you're supposed to pick a marble up and put it down without ever moving the marble in a graceful arc.
On the balls of your feet.
Walk on the balls of your feet, and you're not supposed to do any sudden starts and stops. With things like this, I'm like, how much of this did he personally, honestly believe? Like, was he crazy or was he like a huckster? Because the books sold for, I think I wrote down they cost $25 at that time, which, in today's money
Crazy
is over
money.
$700. So I wonder if people were like, well, I don't get it. I need the next book. Maybe I'll get it if I get the next book. Well, I just wonder. I mean, is he just like cackling to himself while he's writing all of this, or does he really?
He's got to, and he just because he has to keep on selling books, he has to keep on coming up with more harebrained crap.
But what is it? What is it about us that there were so many takers? Because the truth is, he sold those books. And people believed in this. And now he wasn't successful in creating a Ralstonite utopia in New Jersey, but mostly because he picked a really expensive part of New Jersey. He might have had a little bit of luck if he'd settled his utopia. Yeah.
Doesn't he remind you
work for the people? Yeah.
A little of the guy who had that place in Zizek's?
Yes.
So the thing and I can't remember the name of the episode. I'm sorry. Shoot. Anyhow, it was an episode of True Weird Stuff. I'll go look for it while we're doing this. But anyhow, he had the same sort of thing. There's a certain plausibility to what they say about, you should exercise. Well, I can get behind that. You should eat right. Yeah, you can get behind that. And there's certain things that they say that are very obvious, but some people act like, wow, that's profound. And then they're hooked in, and then the other stuff is all piled on. And once they're hooked in, they'll believe all of it.
And he really did. He really did a pretty good job of. There was so much, because Brenna, you've read some of his writing. It's so incredibly insane. It's so complex and wordy that by the time you get to the end of the page, you no longer know what's real or what you believe or anything. You're like, well, what am I even looking at? He did a really good job of hooking people in and keeping them hooked in. And, everything is of its time. So at the time that William Danforth launched People Chow with the Purina Company, this was at a time when there was a real wellness craze in this country that was driven by, believe it or not, breakfast cereal. Like Kellogg, he wasn't making cereal so that you could have a good day at school. He was trying to destroy like the libido. Like he had all this wacky stuff going on in his head. It was quasi-religious. It was quasi-medical. Graham crackers were originally invented to keep people from being horny, like absolute nuttery that somehow weirdly centered around the breakfast table. And so you can see how Webster Edgerly just slotted in at this exact perfect moment in history with, let's eat this special food and bounce on the balls of our feet. At the time, it didn't seem all that weird, I guess. Because he had a lot of company.
The episode I'm referring to is The King of Quacks, and the guy's Curtis House Springer. But there's a real similarity between the two of them, and they both had people that followed them with this really obvious advice.
I'm telling you guys, there's something in the American psyche that leaves us so vulnerable to this. We have a long line of people like this taking our money and our trust. And for the most part, they've been fringy, show business, religion. We've had only a handful of big mainstream kind of movements. Ralstonism did not make the mainstream. Look how quickly it was forgotten. But, you look at like Jonestown, right? This is going to make people so mad, but Amway, Lou, what were those multi-level marketing leggings? Yeah. Lululemon.
Lululemon or
those. I thought they were ugly, but that's me. It's to each their own. A lot of people.
That's right.
Lululemon. Yeah. A lot of people got taken in by that messaging, and they lost everything, which is kind of like a running theme. People are searching. There's an emptiness. There's a hole that looks to be filled. These gurus come in, they fill that hole, or they seem to, but then they leave you empty and broken, and maybe alive. In the cult guru world, alive is no guarantee. Look at Heaven's Gate. Look at Jonestown. Look at the Manson family. Look at the Branch Davidians. Look at all of these movements. Invariably, somebody pays. But this guy, dodged every bullet. Brenna, none of his obituaries made any mention of any of this. None. It was almost like...
interesting.
Isn't that interesting? It was almost like by the time he kicked it, people were like, God, he was really racist and nuts. Maybe leave that part
including
out.
Evidently his own family, because they would have written the obituaries, right? At least.
Yeah.
I mean, if his kids, I think he had 2 daughters. I think if they had wanted to carry this forth, we would have heard about it. With 800,000 followers, and one of them rumored to be the Queen of England. I don't know how much veracity there is to that claim, but that fact is floating out there, that she was a follower.
She was a Ralstonite.
Which is...
I couldn't back that up either, but it's definitely one of the claims that's made. The amount of time I spent with Adam Mantongue. So I'm going to give Webster Edgerly, I'm going to give him a lot of credit. But that is a terrible name for your made up language, is it not? Adam Mantongue. It sounds like like a product. It sounds like a product that they used to sell in the back pages of Cosmopolitan magazine. Like, it's the battery operated Adam Mantongue for endless pleasure. It
sounds just like a worse version of English. At the end of the day.
A more complicated version of English.
Yeah.
Infinitely worse. And so I get the book, I download the book on Adam Mantongue, and I'm trying to, he adds all these letters to the alphabet, and he takes like cruel shots at certain existing letters, and all these different ways to say like the vowels. So I'm literally in my house going, There is no way, as bad as English is, as complicated, as hard as it is to learn, Adam Mantongue is unspeakably worse. It made no sense.
That is not
Girl,
the
did
answer.
it make any sense at all? Could you make any sense of it?
No. Sherry, thank you for not writing a part where you'd make me say those things. That's all I can say is thank you for that.
I think they're unsayable.
Yeah, I don't think you actually can... I don't look, even the dogs agree. I'm not, and here's the thing about Webster Edgerly. He himself did not appear to speak Adam Mantongue. It's not ethical to diagnose people at a distance, but I found myself so many times stopping in the middle and going, okay, this guy is so clearly in the grip of self-aggrandizing delusion. Is this a narcissistic personality disorder? The way that he writes, the volume of pages, is he manic? Does he go through these periods of mania where he doesn't sleep for 3 days and he's just, I'm making up my own language. Now, which had me thinking, does he have like a mood disorder? Like, does he have bipolar 1 where he's got these periods of intense mania that he just flows this stuff onto the page? But I couldn't find anything that signaled the other side of that, which would be the depression. All I could find was this cheerful, racist son of a bitch who wanted to kill and castrate people who weren't white, happily making up his own language and trying to invent his own food in his own town. So sometimes we very often look at people that are doing nutty things and we go, well, they must be crazy. But what if they're not crazy? What if they're just not good people?
I think he could potentially be not a good person and also on cocaine. That would be my guess. Something that Janet Six had mentioned in the podcast I was listening to with her is that he had this extra room built off the side of his house because he would type all his crazy stuff at night. And it was a typewriter back then, and it would keep his wife up. So if you're typing 82 books manically or on cocaine, I mean, I get the image of that like Kermit the Frog meme on the typewriter. I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but that's kind of how I picture him writing through the night, keeping his wife up with his craziness.
Well, that's why my first thought was, is he manic? Because when you read what he actually wrote, it feels like this crazy manic stream of consciousness vomited directly onto the page. It does. So maybe, you know what?
Dire need of an editor.
maybe
an editor.
Maybe cocaine is what we have going on there. And the fact that so his books aren't really in print, but they're still available because Branna stumbled across one in a bookstore. Do you remember what they were charging for it?
I don't, but it was more than I was willing to pay because it was crazy. I was at Black Swan Books in Richmond. I think it was probably $25-$30, but I was like, I can't remember which book it was. I think I said it in the email, but it was nuts. I sat there and read 5 or 10 pages. And like you said, I was like, I have no idea what this guy is talking about, but this does not seem like something that a university press would put their stamp of approval on.
Nope, he invented Ralston University, just like he invented Ralstonism, just like he invented Ralstonia in New Jersey, just like he invented
It was talking about
Ralston.
Mind control. Yeah. It was talking about how if you gained perfect health, that you could, at some level, the more books you would buy, I guess, that you could at some point attain mind control and immortality. And I was like, what is this?
Them some big promises to be making.
Immortality.
Yeah.
And that's how
he sold something called the 200-year club or something, where if you bought special water from him, that you could live to be 200.
He's a charlatan.
Like, that's why I say, how much of this was him being a huckster and how much did he actually, like, I feel like it's a blend.
Yeah, I think.
What you don't know? You don't know at what point he started believing his own bullshit. Because don't you get the feeling that it started off as one thing and then it became a grift? There's no question about it. The guy was making money in every direction. But by the end, it felt to me as I read his later work like, oh no, he really does think he's immortal.
Because one of the only pictures you can find of him, he's actually dressed as Christopher Columbus. And when I did more digging on that, it was a costume from a play he had done. And in this play, and I don't know if you talked about this or if you were able to find it, he wrote, directed, and acted in the play about Christopher Columbus. But the one of the reviews of the play by just like a regular theater critic mentioned that the entire play he was walking on the balls of his feet. And the critic was like, what is wrong with this guy? So if he didn't believe it, I don't think he would do that publicly.
The balls of the feet thing, and I had to leave so much out of this episode because, you know, we were pushing toward the Purina Ralston unholy merger. Because I mean, I'm guessing that probably if you have a pet right now and you're listening, maybe half of the people with a pet right now listening are Purina or Purina Pro Plan customers. So like this is in your kitchen, like this. You are pouring into the bowl this little bit of history. I think he did believe that stuff about the balls of your feet, and I can't make that make any sense for anyone in any way. I want you to imagine spending an hour bopping around on the balls of your feet. Ralstonites believed that was the only way to walk. So I guess you could see them coming, right? You would know what you were dealing with.
What's going on with them? Oh, those are Ralstonites. Yeah. Up on the balls of their feet. Mm-hmm.
Makes you question Barbie a little bit. On her tiptoes, no matter what.
I do. I love rice checks. Now I want to have some. Now we've talked about it. Now I've got to. I'm sorry.
Oh, while we're talking about rice checks, didn't you love that when Quaker Oats first turned rice into puffed rice, how excited everybody was by that? It's the cereal shot out of a gun.
Oh, well, then I must eat it if it's shot out of a gun.
Oh, you know, there's a whole episode to be done on the cereal aisle in the grocery store. There's a great book. T.C. Boyle wrote a book called The Road to Wellville, and it became a movie. Do you know what I'm talking about, Max? They made a movie. Yes. I can't remember who's in it, but it's about Kellogg and this weird culty wellness fixation, which is another thing. It's another vein that runs through the history of America and American life. Every generation has its own freaking weird wellness thing going on. We're in the middle of one right now. In the 90s, it was the fat-free thing. Nothing tastes as good as being skinny, remember? Now we're in this whole weird, and God, social media, this whole weird wellness grift. Breakfast cereals were part of that. This guy is part of that.
Here's the cast of that movie, Sherry. Anthony Hopkins, Bridget Fonda, Matthew Broderick, John Cusack, and Dana Carvey.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember how it was received. It was a terrific book. I don't remember how the movie was received, but it's almost, there's something so weird about us as a nation, as a culture, that everything has its roots in something jacked up and culty like this.
39% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
They call it mixed reviews, which is never good.
Yeah. It was a good book, though, if you wanted to learn more about that. I'll make a note. We'll do an episode about the weird culty aspects of what you eat for breakfast, which on a big part of that story is the Ralstonism. That's where Wheat Chex comes from. That's where Chex Mix comes from. Shredded Ralston became Wheat Chex. That was their new name.
Yeah.
But prior to getting that new name, Shredded Ralston was being marketed to people as the ultimate food for boosting your natural electricity and magnetism. Provided you ate it while bouncing on the balls of your feet. Yeah. So we're going to stay in eugenics a little bit for next week's episode because it's fair season in a lot of parts of the country. If you're listening to this episode when it was dropped, which is in the end of July 2025, we're heading into state fair season all around America. And who doesn't love the state fair? Tractor pulls, cotton candy, Ferris wheels, the livestock exhibitions, little 4-H kids leading their goats and cows into the pens. But not all that long ago, right around the same time that my man here was trying to persuade people to not be able to hold on to a stick. Right around that same time,
Genius.
Human beings were competing at state fairs for the best human being prize. It was eugenics at the fair. People were opening their mouths and having their teeth examined. People were having the distance between their eyes measured. And we were awarding prizes to the best human livestock. How's that for a good day at the fair? And that's going to be on the next episode of True Weird Stuff. Brenna Ralston, we are so happy for you and everyone related to you that you're not really related to this guy. And thank you for inspiring this week's episode.
And thank you for listening to the podcast, too. We really appreciate it.
And for joining us.
I sent it to everyone, and thank you for having me on.
We're so excited. And y'all, if you're concerned that you may be in some way related to a real kook, drop us a line at trueweirdstuff.com. Brenna, thank you we know you're a school teacher, and this was precious time that you gave us to be on today's episode of True Weird Stuff. We appreciate that. We hope you have a great year in the classroom. And for all of you that are listening, we'll see you next week for Blue Ribbon Human Livestock right here on True Weird Stuff.
And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus button in the top right corner, and now it helps an independent podcast like ours to get discovered. And we really appreciate it if you subscribe, rate, and review True Weird Stuff.
Hit our website, trueweirdstuff.com, for show notes and photos and videos when we have it, and bonus content. Everything True Weird is waiting for you at trueweirdstuff.com.
And follow True Weird Stuff on Instagram.
True Weird Stuff is a Now Media production. Our executive producer is Anthony Garcia. The show is written and hosted by me, Sherry Lynch, along with my deeply weird director, Max Sweeten. Our equally odd producer is Carrie Bowser. Additional production by the mysterious Stephen Call. Our digital witch and social media cult leader is Heather Furr. Original graphics by Kevin Nash. Original artworks by Olivia Axlin. True Weird original music composed and performed by Jack Griffin and Zane Nash. Copyright 2025 Now Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs remembered.